In the kingdom of Iolcos in northern Greece, King Cretheus had just died, and his sons were about to enter a fraternal struggle for the throne. Aeson was the king's firstborn, but Pelias, his half-brother on his mother's side, said he was entitled to the crown. Pelias was the queen's son with Poseidon, god of the seas. Pelias gained support for his cause and usurped the throne from his brother. Since Aeson had a peaceful temperament, Pelias decided that he would spare his life if he would renounce the throne. Under threat, Aeson gave in. Pelias went to an oracle because he wanted to know if a suitor threatened his throne. The priestess of Apollo told him that he would reign for a long time until a man wearing only a sandal appeared. This man would bring about Pelias's downfall. Pelias, whenever he met a new person, instead of looking him in the eye, would stare at his feet, trying to find his future enemy. Aeson's wife had a son. The father feared for the life of the newborn boy. To protect him, Aeson sought the help of Chiron, a famous and wise centaur who lived in the Thessalian mountains. The centaur was a famous trainer of heroes and taught Jason the art of hunting and the use of weapons. When he was still a teenager, Jason encountered a dangerous leopard that was terrorizing the local shepherds. The beast attacked the young man, but using the knowledge taught to him by his master, Jason managed to defend himself against the leopard. From then on, Jason wore the leopard's skin as a cloak and was respected in the region for the courage he had shown. When Jason turned 20 years old, Chiron revealed to him who he really was. The boy was entitled to the Iolcos throne, and, now that he was an adult, he was to fight for what belonged to him. Jason armed himself and set out for Iolcos. He knew he would have to resort to cunning to win the throne. After all, Pelias was a powerful king. Along the way, he came to a flowing stream. On the banks was an old woman, who asked him for help because she could not make the crossing. Jason carried the old woman on his back, and the two of them reached the other bank safely. But as they were leaving the water, Jason realized that one of his sandals had been swept away by the current. And suddenly, Jason noticed that the old woman had been transformed into a beautiful woman. It was the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, who had disguised herself as an old woman to test the goodness of men. Because of Jason's kindness, he could count on divine blessings in his adventure. Jason arrived in Iolcos. News of the presence of a stranger wearing only one sandal quickly reached the king. The young hero was taken to the monarch, who tried to disguise the fear he felt at the sight of the barefoot warrior. Jason said he was there to regain the throne to which he was entitled, but he was not seeking revenge. Therefore, his uncle could keep all the wealth he had accumulated, provided he returned the royal crown and scepter to him. The astute king replied that he intended to accept the demands and avoid a bloodbath, provided that the brave boy traveled to Colchis and took the golden fleece. This way he would know that his kingdom would be in the hands of a brave king blessed by the gods. Jason agreed to his uncle's proposal. Without fear, he began preparations to face one of the greatest adventures in Greek mythology. After accepting King Pelias' challenge, word that Jason wanted to raise volunteers to participate in the greatest adventure the Greek people had ever heard of spread throughout Hellas. Jason had been blessed by the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom, inspired the carpenter Argus, son of Poseidon, to build an amazing ship, the likes of which had never been made before. The ship's wood would never rot in water, and it was the only boat in the world to sail the open sea. Before, sailors had never dared to stray too far from dry land. From a sacred oak trunk coming directly from the Oracle of Dodona was carved a beautiful carving of the goddess Hera. This wonderful ornament was set into the ship's bow. Apart from the symbol's traditional protective effects, the goddess Hera could communicate directly with the crew members through it. Many Greek heroes wished to participate in the quest to find the Golden Fleece. Among them was the renowned Hercules, who brought along his friend Hylas, and the glorious Theseus, who had defeated the Minotaur. From Sparta came the Dioscuri, the twin brothers Castor and Pollux, brothers of the beautiful Helen, she who in the future would be the reason for the most famous war in Greek mythology. The sons Aeacus, Telamon, father of Ajax the Great, and Pelias, father of Achilles, also presented themselves. Orpheus, famous son of the god Apollo, showed up with his lyre, joined by the expert hunter Meleager. Many other heroes from all over Greece continued to turn up. Even Boreas's winged sons. King Pelias feared that the superb crew would help Jason accomplish his task. The carpenter Argus presented the heroes with his masterpiece, a magnificent vessel without match. Honoring the builder, the crew named the ship Argo and proclaimed themselves Argonauts. Jason proposed an election or lottery to decide the captain and head of the expedition. But there was no doubt among the heroes. Jason was to lead them and was acclaimed head of the Argonauts. Due sacrifices were made to the gods for the deities to bless and protect the Argonauts. More than 50 heroes set out into the unknown. The adventure of Jason and the Argonauts had just begun. Jason and the Argonauts were crossing the Aegean Sea looking for the Golden Fleece. The ship Argo was an excellent vessel and braved the open sea with unprecedented skill. The heroic sailors rowed with great vigor, for there has never been a more glorious crew than this one. Not before, not since. They spotted an island on the horizon and went to it to restock their supplies. It was the island of Lemnos, and an ominous event had recently occurred. For several decades, the women on that island had been abused by their husbands and forced to live a miserable life. But a great rebellion broke out when the men of the island brought new wives from Thrace and further humiliated the resident women. They attacked all the men of Lemnos. Many were killed, and others fled the island to save themselves. The island of Lemnos was ruled by women only, and the presence of men was banned. The island's former lords tried to retake power several times, but were pushed back by the warrior women. When the Argonauts landed on Lemnos, they were met by an army of women warriors who threateningly aimed arrows at them. The heroes had peaceful intentions and tried not to appear threatening. Jason chose Echion as the Argonauts' emissary before the Queen of Lemnos. Echion was the son of the god Hermes and had the gift of speech and persuasion. Before Hypsipyle, Echion used all his charisma and eloquence to convince the queen that they had good intentions and only wished to restock water and food. After meeting those men of immense value, the women of the island decided that they could not continue to live that way. Successive enemy invasions weakened the women, and without men to do the heavier work, the island's development was hampered. Therefore, the queen ordered the delivery of many gifts to the Argonauts. They were also invited to the queen's great banquet. For several days, the Argonauts feasted and enjoyed the hospitality of the Lemnos women. They were such pleasant days that the heroes practically forgot their mission. Hercules, who had stayed on the ship waiting for his fellow men, appeared and used his powerful voice. He scolded the heroes for having forgotten their duty. On that island, they would find only an inglorious life, for many had wives at home who anxiously awaited their return. The men returned to the ship in shame. Jason very graciously told them that they had to depart. The women, who previously did not want the men to land on the island, were sad to see them go. The women of Lemnos saw the Argonauts leave without looking back. Many now had within their wombs the seed of life. The sons of the heroes would later give birth to a new generation of men on that island. The Argonauts reached the Strait of Hellespont, present-day Turkey. The waters were patrolled by the Trojan navy under orders of King Laomedon, who barred foreigners from entering without permission. Therefore, the heroes decided to cross those waters at night to avoid the enemy ships. With the help of the hero Lynceus, who had the eyes of a lynx and could see over long distances even at night, The heroes sailed those dangerous seas towards their destination. After sailing through unknown waters, the Argonauts arrived at an island where the Doliones, a people descended from Poseidon, lived. They were warmly welcomed by Cyzicus, king of the Doliones, who had already been warned by an oracle to properly receive the incoming visitors. By coincidence, the king was celebrating his wedding that day. The Argonauts were invited to the celebrations on a pleasant and joyful occasion. The next day, the king took the Argonauts to a hill and showed them his kingdom. He said that on the island lived dangerous giants that attacked the visitors. Sometimes his kingdom was besieged by Pelasgians marauders. On top of the mountain, the Argonauts saw the ship Argo moored on the beach, whose protection was guaranteed by Hercules. The terrifying six-armed giants that the king had spoken of suddenly appeared amongst the trees. They began to hurl large rocks at the Argo, trying to destroy it, exploiting the hero's absence. But they didn't expect that Hercules, using his formidable bow, would heroically defend the ship with perfect shots. One giant after another was slaughtered by the arrows of Zeus's son. Hercules did not waste any arrows and shot down all the giants. The name of the great hero became popular in distant lands. As thanks for helping to rid the island of those monsters, King Cyzicus gave the Argonauts many gifts. Jason and his crew set sail, leaving behind a friendly nation. But that same night, the Argonauts were hit by a terrible storm and were lost in the darkness. Thanks to the lightning flashes, they saw the silhouette of an island on the horizon. The heroes managed to secure the ship in an inlet and landed safely. They protected themselves from the storm by entering the woods near the beach. While walking through the forest, the Argonauts were ambushed by assailants who attacked them in the middle of the darkness. The Argonauts defended themselves efficiently. Most of them were very experienced fighters, and this allowed them to take down their enemies. But when Jason stuck his sword into the belly of an enemy, he realized that his enemy was King Cyzicus, leading his men against whom he thought were Pelasgians invaders. The Argonauts had mistakenly killed his new friends. Upon hearing of this, the newlywed queen ran to her husband, but his spirit had already departed to Hades. The desperate queen threw herself over the king's body, feeling an extremely deep sadness. She became unwell and joined her husband in the world of the dead. The Argonauts headed toward their destination, and after another glorious victory, Hercules was now rowing with great energy. This rowing was so strong that sometimes the ship Argo had more rowers on the opposite side from Hercules to keep the boat on course. Rowing alongside the hero was Hylas, Hercules' young squire, whom Hercules treated as his son. After so much strength, Hercules' oar failed to resist and broke completely. So the Argonauts went to the island of Mysia. They wanted to cut down a tree and make a new oar for the hero. Hercules and Hylas went into the forest. The hero searched for an ideal tree for the new oar, while Hylas tried to find a source of drinking water. The son of Zeus told Hylas that they should split up to carry out their tasks faster. After that, they would meet again by the ship. Hercules found a strong tree with the ideal trunk for carving the new oar and began the manufacture. When, at the end of the day, Hercules returned to the ship, he was told that Hylas had not yet arrived. All the heroes went into the woods to look for Hylas, shouting his name, but to no avail. But they found the jars that Hylas had carried, abandoned on the banks of a pond. Jason realized that there was no trace of a struggle. Everything indicated that Hylas had gone into the water and possibly drowned. Hercules didn't believe that assumption. He knew that Hylas was an excellent swimmer, so he went in search of his friend. Hours earlier that same day, Hylas arrived at the shores of the pond and was entranced by the scenic beauty of the place. But it was not only he who was enthralled. Behind a rock was Dryope, a Naiad nymph. and one of the lesser water divinities. She fell in love with the young man as soon as she saw him. The boy squatted down to taste that crystal clear water, and, out of nowhere, he was surprised by the Naiads' kiss. In the lagoon waters, Hylas saw the beautiful Dryope and the lovely Naiad sisters emerge. They were delightful creatures. Dryope proclaimed her love to the young hero, and he could not resist the Naiad nymph's bewitching look. Hylas was pulled into the water without offering any resistance. Dryope led the hero toward an underwater cave. It is said that Hylas went on to live happily among the Naiad nymphs, but the young Argonaut was never seen again. At the behest of Zeus, Hermes, the messenger god, announced that the search for Hylas should end, for he was living happily among the nymphs. He also said that Hercules' destiny was not to continue alongside the Argonauts toward Colchis, for he was still on a mission to complete his 12 labors. After the divine message, Jason ordered the Argonauts to return to the ship. With great regret, they proceeded without the greatest of all heroes. The Argonauts were again looking for fresh water to fuel their ship. Near Bithynia, they found a beautiful spring where they could fulfill their purpose and decided to land. But when they went to the spring, a huge man stood in the way of the heroes. He was extremely strong and scary looking. His name was Amico. He claimed that this fountain had been created for him by Poseidon, the lord of the oceans, and his glorious father. To drink from the fountain, one of the Argonauts had to fight a boxing match against him. The Argonauts looked at each other fearfully. The giant was known to have the most powerful punch of all men. But Pollux volunteered to face the brute, who laughed at the courage of the frail man. His brother Castor tried to dissuade Pollux from fighting the monster, for no man had ever survived a fight against Amico. And after all, they still could find water elsewhere. The giant said it was normal for men to tremble before Poseidon's son, but Pollux claimed that he was the son of Zeus, and just like his father, he would never run away from a fight. The two fighters stood face to face, and the Argonauts cheered Pollux on with enthusiastic cries. Amico landed a powerful blow to Pollux's stomach, which caused the hero to completely lose his breath. While Pollux was down on his knees trying to fill his lungs with air, the giant scoffed, asking if this boy was truly the best they had. Pollux stood up and said that the fight wasn't over yet. Amico was furious at the provocation. The giant landed some extremely dangerous blows, but Pollux, with great agility, dodged them all. Pollux realized that he would not be able to put up a fair fight against a stronger opponent, so he chose to make fast attacks and counterattacks. With each punch missed by the giant, Amico's frustration grew, and he tried to hit even harder, wasting more and more energy. Meanwhile, Pollux focused his attacks on his opponent's waist to rob him of more of his breath. When Amico finally seemed to show signs of exhaustion, Pollux decided to attack. Using a quick sequence of punches, Pollux put the giant on the defensive. With a strong uppercut to Amico's chin, Pollux knocked the giant out. But according to Amico's rules, the fight was to the death. However, the giant was pleading for his life. After grabbing Amico by the hair, Pollux asked if he had ever shown mercy to his opponents. Amico promised never again to challenge anyone who wanted to drink from his father's well. In that way, Poseidon's offering would become a gift to all travelers. Hearing this promise, Pollux spared his opponent. The Argonauts filled their amphorae with fresh water and set off happily, knowing that they had with them the world's greatest boxer. The city of Salymdesis, which was controlled by King Phineus, was empty and rotting when the Argonauts arrived, and there was a foul odor in the air due to the abundance of bird droppings that had been dispersed around the city. The heroes sought for the monarch atop the city's acropolis, as he was a brilliant seer and could have knowledge that was essential to the Argonauts' expedition's success. Since Zetes and Calais were Phineus's in-laws, they were aware that he would never desert his realm. Phineus was seated at a dining table within the demolished palace, among the squalor. The monarch appeared to be a mere shadow of the man he once was, since he was so skinny. Phineus explained to the Argonauts that he had formerly been a well-respected sorcerer who had relied on the gods' favor and attended the feasts of Olympus frequently, because the gods valued his company and had invited him. However, he would pick up on some of the gods' plans during these feasts, listening in on some discussions, and get access to confidential information. He would occasionally inform some individuals of the gods' plans, so they might take appropriate action. Zeus, however, learned what Phineus was up to, and brutally punished him for exploiting the gods' trust. His sight was lost first. Living in the dark wasn't bad enough. Phineus and his kingdom also had to deal with the filthy and revolting Harpies. Every day, Phineus received a banquet, but just as he was about to start eating, the Harpies showed up and made a lot of noise. They threw their trash all over the table while eating the king's meal. To stay alive, Phineus could only consume the barest minimum. Phineus assured the Argonauts that if they helped him get rid of the Harpies, the king would reveal to them a secret important to the completion of his quest. In agreement, the Argonauts went into hiding as they awaited the Harpies. The Harpies showed up when the feast of Phineus arrived, but the Argonauts quickly drove them away. The heroes managed to capture one of them, but the other two tried to flee. However, Zetes and Calais, the two winged brothers, flew after the animals, abusing their sister's spouse. Both brothers engaged the Harpies in an air combat. The three Harpies were eventually subjugated and about to be put to death, but the miraculous intervention of the goddess Iris saved them, as she was their sister and would not let them perish. The Harpies left with the assurance that they would not bother poor Phineus ever again. In return, Phineus showed the Argonauts a perilous challenge they would need to conquer if they truly intended to complete their goal. Their biggest concern was that the tunnel would close as soon as they learned that any living thing was between its walls, as was the case with the Symplegades, two enormous rock walls that created a short and narrow corridor. Jason released a dove as instructed by Phineus, allowing it to pass through the Symplegades. The bird was able to traverse the corridor before the walls closed to avoid being crushed. The Argonauts sped up their vessel towards the tunnel as the walls started to open. The walls quickly moved back to their original place and started to shut. To the relief of its legendary crew, the ship Argo pierced the rocks at the last second. Jason and the Argonauts were getting closer to their destination, but they still had to deal with many obstacles. When the Argonaut ship sailed past the dangerous Symplegades cliffs, the men found castaways crying for help. They were 4 young men with features very similar to those of Greeks, but no one knew if a Greek expedition had ever reached those lands before the Argonauts. The castaways were questioned on board by Jason. They claimed that they had set sail from Colchis, the destination of the Argonauts, and they said that they were the sons of Phrixus, the young Greek prince who had arrived in Colchis riding the Golden Ram. They were grandchildren of the king of Colchis, for Phrixus had married the monarch's daughter, but the castaways claimed that their grandfather was a tyrant who despised his grandchildren for having foreign blood. This justified the physical resemblance of the young men to Greeks. Jason explained the mission of the Argonauts to the shipwrecked princes, and they said they could help them if he took them back to Greece. The princes said that the Argonauts' mission was virtually impossible. After all, Aeetes was a very powerful king with a strong army and navy. He also had the powerful sorceress Medea on his side. But there was an even worse obstacle for the Argonauts, who wanted so much to reach the Golden Fleece. The Golden Ram's skin was guarded by a fearsome and invincible dragon. who kept watch over this artifact day and night. Jason told the young men that the gods were on the side of the Argonauts. With so many heroes grouped together, they would find a way to steal the Golden Fleece. With new local guides, the Argonauts' journey to Colchis became easier. Their goal was near. The Argonauts arrived at the capital of the kingdom of Colchis, amazed at the grandeur and wealth of King Aeetes' palaces. Many buildings had been erected by the gods and Cyclops. The king's grandsons took Jason and some Argonauts to their grandfather's throne room, introducing the heroes as those who had saved them from certain death at sea. The king was always suspicious of foreigners, and on this occasion it was no different. He harshly asked what the visitors wanted. Jason made no secret of his intentions. He said he was there to take the Golden Fleece with him, but they were not thieves and wanted to pay the necessary price by helping in all tasks. The king said that just one favor would have a similar cost to the Golden Fleece, but this task would certainly cost Jason his life. He was to perform alone the sowing of Ares, a dangerous ritual in honor of the god of war. Jason said that he had not traveled so far to give up at the last moment and accepted the task imposed by the king. At that moment, the powerful sorceress Medea entered the throne room, an imposing and fascinating figure. But she was unaware of being under the sights of Eros' bow. At the request of the goddess Hera, he was there to help the heroes. After being struck by Eros' arrow, Medea fell in love with Jason. Jason decided to perform the task, unaware of the passion that overflowed from Medea's heart. This infatuation would be crucial to the mission's success. Jason was desolate. Although he had shown great courage in accepting the challenge from the king of Colchis, he was almost certain that he would perish in trying to complete the task. Nearby, Medea was also distraught. Her heart had been seized by passion, but loving Jason would be considered a great betrayal to her family. Medea and two companions decided to look for Jason. Suspecting the ladies-in-waiting, she said she planned to poison Jason, but this was not her true intention. Medea told Jason that the gods wanted her to help him in his deadly task, but to do so, she needed the hero to swear that he would take her as his wife and never abandon her. Jason had no doubts and took the oath. It was his last hope to avoid certain death, and Medea was a beautiful woman. Medea handed him a vial with a powerful potion that only a true disciple of Hecate could produce. The elixir was made from the blood of the titan Prometheus, who was trapped on a rock in the Caucasus, whose liver was being devoured by a dreadful bird. Following the directions of the sorceress Medea, Jason anointed his body with the enchanted and protective oil. The other heroes wished him good luck. They had no idea of the challenge he would encounter, but they knew that the scheming King Aeetes would not trade the Golden Fleece for an ordinary task. Jason presented himself on the field of Ares, where the king and the court were waiting for him, hoping to see a bloody spectacle that would culminate in the hero's death. He was to bind two mighty bulls to a plow that let off fire from their nostrils, and after that, he would have to sow the earth with dragon's teeth. The bulls were set free. They were impressive creatures with bronze hooves, having been offered by Hephaestus to the king of Colchis. One of the bulls advanced furiously against Jason, who jumped on it like a Crete bullfighter. The other bull attacked him with a blast of flames, which would certainly have immolated the hero had he not had his body protected by the sorceress's potion. Jason resorted to agility to escape the beast's thrusts, which were becoming increasingly frustrated. With an acrobatic jump, Jason managed to make the animals clash violently with each other. Taking advantage of the animals' daze, Jason dragged them by the horns towards the plow yokes. With the animals tamed and tied to the plow, Jason started sowing the field. To the audience's astonishment, Jason managed to restrain the oxen and sewed the dragon's teeth into the grooves opened by the plow. King Aeetes smiled with satisfaction, for a surprise still awaited the hero. From the earth sown with the dragon's teeth began to emerge frightening creatures. Several huge monsters sprouted from each dragon's tooth, ready to attack the hero. But Medea had already warned Jason that this would occur. Inspired by Cadmium's story, she told the hero to throw a round rock among the giants. The rock caused the monsters to mysteriously start fighting among themselves. In a massive free-for-all fight, Jason started to exterminate one creature after another. After annihilating the last one, Jason had finally accomplished his task. Jason was lifted on the shoulders by his peers and celebrated for the great achievement. The evil King Naiads realized that this young man was relying on the favor of the gods. He feared that not even the Dragon of Colchis would stop the invincible hero and prevent him from taking the Golden Fleece. He felt that something would have to be done. King Naiads called for his men, readying a surprise attack on Jason and the heroes as he was enraged that the former had survived the sowing mission in Ares' realm. But Medea, who was already madly in love with Jason, would not allow her father to plan against her darling. Before her father organized his warriors to launch an attack, Medea rushed to Jason and suggested that they try to get the Golden Fleece. As Medea led Jason into a pitch-black forest, they could make out a golden glow coming from the distance among the trees. It was the skin of the lamp that had carried Phrixus and brought him to Colchis. But, as expected, the mighty dragon of Colchis protected the fleece. The hero shuddered, even though he was the epitome of courage. But Medea tried to soothe him, saying that she was sure of what to do. Medea fearlessly approached the powerful dragon, which was drooling in anticipation of its impending meal. The witch lifted her arms and called for the magical goddess Hecate. The dragon did something he had never done before. He fell asleep, thanks to Medea's abilities. Jason, on tiptoe, and quite scared of disturbing the monster, made his way to the tree where the Golden Fleece was hanging. Jason was happy to finally have the priceless artifact in his arms. Jason and Medea hastened to the Argonauts' ship, which was waiting for them to leave the kingdom of Colchis. However, as they were about to leave, Absyrtus, Medea's brother, saw them and caught the sorceress betraying his father by giving the stranger his wealth. The Argonauts managed to escape uninjured from the dominions of King Naiads. As he had promised, Jason brought Medea with him to take her as his bride. But the Argonauts were still in danger, as the mighty naval fleet of the King of Colchis pursued them with the intention of recovering the Gold Fleece and punishing the criminals. The fleet of King Naiads was pursuing Jason and the Argonauts. A portion of it was under the leadership of Prince Absyrtus, who was desperate to capture his sister Medea for betraying his family. The Argonauts chose to take a different path home to elude their pursuers, rowing against the current of Istros. But the rowers had to halt, having become exhausted from fighting the river non-stop. Using his accurate vision, Linnaeus was able to locate the Prince of Colchis' ships, which were already quite near to the Argonauts' camp. They had a significant numerical advantage. To end the chase and save a slaughter that would only cause suffering for all sides, Linnaeus made the decision to see Prince Absyrtus. If they delivered him the traitor Medea, the prince declared he would not care about the Golden Fleece and that the Argonauts may have it. Once back in camp, Linnaeus informed Jason about the Prince of Colchis' offer for peace, but Medea was indignant at such a demand. Medea accused Jason of breaking the vow he made to take her to Greece with him and never leave her, making her his wife when she promised him the Golden Fleece. Jason was in a perilous position, since all the troops under his command could perish if he did not breach his word. The Argonauts agreed to the suggested bargain. Medea would be handed to the prince at the temple of the goddess Artemis, according to a message that Absyrtus received. When the prince first entered the goddess's temple, Medea was there, tied and sobbing on her knees. Absyrtus declared that he wanted to murder her right now, but she would be taken back to Colchis and bleed in front of everyone so that all would see what happens to those who betray their community. When this happened, Jason's sword struck the prince in the back and pierced his chest. Fearing for their lives, the prince's guards ran back to their camp. Absyrtus was found dead at the base of the statue of the goddess Artemis, who was offended that such a sophisticated conspiracy had been carried out in her temple. Because she thought her brother would still be helpful soon, Medea urged the Argonauts to take his body. The navy of King Naiads now chased the Argonauts as they rowed back up the river. The Colchis fleet were more suited for navigating rivers, so they wouldn't take long to reach the Argonauts. From the ship's bow, King Naiads yelled that Medea would suffer greatly for taking part in the ambush that killed the prince, and that he would exact retribution as soon as he found the body of his beloved son. Medea responded by declaring that if he needed the prince's body, she would provide it. She then threw her half-brother's head underwater. The grotesque scene of Medea tossing her half-brother's body parts into the water horrified the Argonauts. However, the ships of King Naiads gave up the chase to find the prince's remains. When the monarch saw his adored son in bits, he broke down in tears. Devastated, he decided to send home half of his fleet, while giving the rest of them a new mission: to hunt down the Argonauts. The Argonauts were fearful of Medea after the event, since they didn't know what the sorceress was capable of to further her objectives. But the truth is that all the Argonauts would have perished if it were not for Medea's crazy deed of tossing her brother's remains into the river. The Argonauts paused to rest after eluding the Colchis warriors, since it had taken so much energy to oppose the river's stream. However, they were unaware that a new foe was keeping watch on them. The Cynocephalians, men with dog-like heads, emerged from the forest. These hybrid creatures charged towards the Argonauts like wild animals. After their initial shock, the fearless Greek heroes faced the Cynocephalians with great bravery and defeated them. The Argonauts overcame the dogmen, but were still afraid of what other animals they may come across in that foreign region. They argued that they could not pursue upstream indefinitely, but also realized that they could not turn around. King Naiads' warriors were undoubtedly awaiting them to ambush them. Once more venturing out, Linnaeus spotted the river running toward the sea at the far end of the horizon, thanks to his wonderful vision. The Argonauts started felling trees to use the trunks for a risky plan. To get to the other river, the Argonauts pulled the ship out of the water and pushed it for a considerable amount of time on dry land. Since it required so much work, many Argonauts even considered quitting and moving forward on foot. The Argonauts were able to reach the river that would carry them directly to the Mediterranean Sea because of Jason's strong leadership, who would not allow his men to become disheartened. The Argonauts rejoiced as their ship had returned to Poseidon's dominion. They could now return to Greece. When a hazardous storm struck their ship, the Argonauts' joy faded away. Zeus poured forth his thunder, in a clear sign that the gods looked not to be happy. The main mast of the ship carrying the Argonauts was destroyed by one of these lightning hits. Men started to accuse Medea of murdering her half-brother so heinously in an ambush at the temple of Artemis and then defiling his body, to the point of offending the gods. Jason defended Medea by stating that, while her actions were wrong, if it weren't for them, the Argonauts would all have perished by that point. The gods were undoubtedly angry with the Argonauts. A carving made by Hera appeared on their ship, declaring that Jason and Medea should atone for their misdeeds. Jason and the Argonauts followed the goddess's instructions and traveled to the island of Circe, a powerful sorceress who could atone for the atrocities the Argonauts had done using her magic and rites. When Jason and Medea arrived at the sorceress Circe's palace, she and her pet lions were waiting for them under the palace portal. The sorceress was informed by Medea and Jason of their visit, and that they required Circe's assistance to avoid being pursued by the Furies. Circe chastised the pair for their misdeeds. But because they were present due to a sign from the goddess Hera, who appeared to favor that trip, she would carry out a rite to atone for their transgressions. Only Artemis looked upset with the desecration encouraged in her temple when Circe sacrificed a scapegoat, which significantly lessened the anger of the gods. The Argonauts were permitted to continue their trip without being harassed by the Furies, since Circe felt empathy for Medea, who had sacrificed everything for her love of Jason. The primary monster was also fixed during this time. However, as soon as they left Circe's island, they were in grave danger from mermaids who were residing on a neighboring rock. It was nearly impossible to resist their song, and the Argonauts started to be drawn to them. Their entrancing singing drew the sailors to their rocks, where their boats would drown. Butes, one of the Argonauts, was quickly seduced by the mermaids and dove into the ocean to reach the creature's island. Orpheus, the best musician in the world with a particularly blessed ear, was one of the Argonauts and the son of the god Apollo. He recognized the dangers hidden in the mermaid's melody. Their music was drowned out by Orpheus's song, which he began playing on his lyre while standing at the prow of the ship. The Argo narrowly escaped being destroyed on the mermaid rocks, thanks to Orpheus, but there were still many grave dangers to come. After fleeing the terrible mermaids, the Argonauts reached the land of the Phaeacians, where King Alcinous celebrated the marriage of Medea and Jason. If they tried to kidnap her at the behest of her father, they would be committing a crime, for she was now Jason's lawful wife. Freed from persecution, the Argonauts were now able to return home. But Zeus and Artemis were still begrudging the heroes and would not allow an easy homecoming. The Argonauts faced successive stormy days fostered by Zeus. The terrible winds pushed them toward the Libyan coast. The strong waves and winds caused the Argo to run aground. When the sea calmed down, the ship was bogged down in the coastal sand. The heroes concluded that the gods did not want them to go back to sea. Obeying the guidance of the favorable deities, they carried the ship on their shoulders and sought a new port to set sail for home. For 12 days, the brave heroes walked in the desert. They had now reversed roles with the Argo, the vessel that had carried them. Now, they were the ones carrying the ship. Medea lacked the hero's strength and was carried by Jason, who almost perished while crossing the desert. Fate led Jason and the Argonauts to meet Triton, deity son of Poseidon and heir to the god of the seas. He said he would help the heroes get back to sea and ensure a safe departure. After they put the ship back into the water, Triton swam in front of the ship, blowing a shell that calmed seas and winds. This cleared the way for the heroes' return home. But the Argonauts would have no peace yet. As they skirted the island of Crete, they were attacked by Talos, a bronze giant. The creature was tossing huge stones, trying to hit the Argonauts' ship. The creature was the work of Hephaestus at the request of Zeus to protect the island of Crete from invaders. The rocks thrown by the giant almost hit the ship. The Argonauts were in a desperate situation. They only had half an amphora of water and could die of thirst if they failed to renew their supplies. Medea took the last amphora of water and shouted to the giant, asking if he would accept some wine. Luckily for the Argonauts, the giant loved wine and said he would accept some. Medea had a trick up her sleeve. She churned the liquid in the amphora into a powerful sleeping nectar. The Argonauts landed on the island of Crete. Medea led them, carrying the amphora, which she offered to Talos. The giant drank the liquid in the vessel, claiming that it was the worst wine he had ever drunk. For this, they would all pay with their lives. The Argonauts ran to try to save themselves, for the creature was armored by Hephaestus's crafted bronze. The giant managed to trap some heroes, and the end seemed near. But Talos reached for his head and looked dizzy. Medea's magic potion took longer than she imagined, but it worked, and the giant tumbled to the ground. As he fell, his ankle hit a sharp stone, punching a large vein of the giant. All of Talos's blood began to flow out of the wound. Unopposed by the giant Talos, the Argonauts replenished the ship to continue their journey that seemed near its end. The Argonauts had finally come close to returning home, but they were sailing at night in utter darkness. It seemed as if they were floating on the dreadful waters of the underworld rivers. They were completely directionless in the darkness. Heeding Jason's prayers, the god Apollo fired a bright arrow into the sky, and its glow showed the way the Argonauts had to go. While dreaming, Euphemus, considered the most righteous of the Argonauts, was visited by the nymph Libya, who said that it was not her fate to be taken to Greece. She had to be taken back to Poseidon's domains, and there she would create a kingdom for Euphemus. Euphemus shared his dream with Jason, and showed him a stone that he had brought with him as a souvenir of the Argonauts' visit to North Africa. Jason interpreted the dream and told his friend to throw the stone into the ocean. Euphemus acted accordingly and dropped the rock into the sea. An island sprang up among the waves, right where the rock sank. It was the island of Caliste, today known as Santorini. There, Euphemus and his descendants would reign for a long time. In the port of Iolcus, King Pelias watched the Argonauts' ship approaching, having accomplished a task that everyone believed impossible. Jason stood proudly in the ship's bow, holding up the golden ram's fleece that had saved Phrixus's life. The scheming king had no intention of honoring his agreement with Jason and entrusting him with the crown he was entitled to. Still, he was not foolish enough to defy him while he was surrounded by his powerful comrades. He held great feasts and sacrifices to honor the Argonauts' great achievement, and waited for the heroes to scatter, for they had to return to their own lands. When Jason finally went to exact the fulfillment of his agreement, King Pelias denied having made such a deal. Without his friend's help, who had already left, Jason could do nothing. Medea would not accept this situation, and decided to take revenge on the king for not keeping his promise to her husband. Medea grabbed an old goat and showed it to the king's 2 princess daughters, telling them that the animal was near death, but that she could restore its youth. The sorceress quartered the lamb and threw it into a cauldron containing a miracle recipe. Medea revealed to the princesses a young and youthful goat, without any traces of the illnesses it previously had. The sorceress then told the princesses how great it would be if King Pelias were restored to health and could get rid of his issues. Pelias's daughters were elated at such an idea, because the king suffered from several chronic diseases. Medea then told them in detail what they should do. While King Pelias was sleeping, his daughter entered his room and cut him to pieces. They made the magic recipe precisely as Medea had taught them, but the result was not quite what they had expected. The king's daughters were desperate when they realized that they had been fooled by the wicked sorceress. They had murdered their own father. Acastus, Pelias's son and heir, banished Jason and his sinister wife from their newly inherited kingdom. The hero and his wife would go on to Corinth, where they had relatives. However, the outcome of the Argonauts' leader's plight would be as tragic as King Pelias's fate. Due to the legendary reputation Jason had built following his journey with the Argonauts, Creon, the ruler of Corinth, welcomed him and Medea when they were ejected from their native country. Jason and Medea had 3 children while they lived in Corinth for 10 years in relative peace. While Jason noticed that the young princess Glaus, who was just a child when he arrived in Corinth, had matured into a lovely lady, time and motherhood had weakened Medea's youthful beauty. Creon had no male offspring to replace him. When he learned that Jason was interested in his daughter, he persuaded Jason to leave Medea and wed his daughter to accede to the kingdom when the monarch passed away. With such a proposal, Jason would not only inherit the kingdom, but also the lovely Princess Glaus, who had already captured his heart. Medea was horrified by the idea and reminded Jason of his vow never to leave her. Jason was cursed by the sorceress. She claimed that, Because he wanted everything, he would lose it all. King Creon exiled Medea from his realm while Jason disregarded her pleas, marrying Princess Glauce nevertheless. King Creon was aware of Medea's potential for harm. Soon after the wedding ceremony, Glauce got a present from Medea that included an extravagant tiara fit for a queen and an oriental silk attire. She started to feel sick and froth at the mouth as she tried on the dress and the tiara. The latter also seemed capable of scorching her head. In his arms as she passed away, King Creon tried to save his daughter. Medea had cursed the tiara and poisoned the inside of the garment. After coming into contact with the poisoned attire, the princess perished, and the king soon followed. Enraged, Jason entered his home to get revenge on Medea. Jason's servant tried to prevent him from going inside, since what he would see would destroy him. Jason, however, pulled him aside and went inside his house. The situation Jason found himself in was even worse than he had anticipated. Medea had carried out her warning and taken all Jason held dear from him. Jason discovered his 3 children dead on the floor. Jason was completely devastated as Medea left Corinth in a chariot, drawn by 2 dragons that the sorceress's magic had conjured. In his desperation, the hero who undertook one of history's greatest adventures decided there was no longer any reason for him to live in this world and took his own life, joining other legendary Greek heroes in the Elysian fields.